and recommend corrective or emergency actions. Sorry, and recommend corrective or emergency actions to other key personnel. The reservoir inspection team coordinator is the point of contact between the reservoir inspection teams and other key personnel. They're responsible for assembling and mobilizing the RITs, and they're responsible for record keeping. Next, please. Additionally, the reservoir keeper lives on site and is one of the first people on scene. He patrols the facility daily and may be the first to visually inspect or report a dam safety situation. The Water Emergency Command Center Operations Liaison Chief is the point of contact between our operations personnel and other key groups. Uh, they submit requests for operations and personnel to respond during an emergency system-wide emergency event. The Emergency Action Plan Coordinator leads the Emergency Action Plan Review Team, is responsible for officially categorizing an emergency event, and is responsible for communicating with external agencies in areas affected by a dam safety event. The damage assessment teams inspect all other water operations facilities, including water treatment facilities, trunk lines, and pump stations. Next, please. Below is a condensed timeline of the notifications as they might unfold in the scenario. Immediately after the initial shock, RITs, including the RIT coordinator, will begin mobilizing. The reservoir keeper will perform a preliminary visual inspection. During the preliminary visual inspection, the reservoir keeper notices uncontrolled seepage of the dam, notifies the dam safety on call, who will notify the reservoir inspection team coordinator. After being notified of the uncontrolled seepage, the reservoir inspection team coordinator will prioritize Mulholland Dam for inspection, meaning that the first inspection team that arrive will be immediately sent to Mulholland Dam, who request the reservoir keeper to remain on site and report back any developments. Notify the operations liaison chief to have operators report to Mulholland Dam and stand by for further instructions. Notify the EAP coordinator of the reported uncontrolled seepage. He may even preliminarily recommend categorizing the event as a potential failure event. All these steps may occur before the team can actually arrive on site, but the teams will perform inspections and confirm recommended emergency categories when they arrive. Next, please. There's several possible issues that could affect our response time. DWP has taken steps to add some redundancy to several items to mitigate these issues. All forms of communication will likely be impacted. Email outages may be likely. Email is the easiest form of communication to notify all personnel at once. However, we do have redundant forms of communication which we can use. Phone services will likely be overwhelmed and calls may not go through, but the department has provided several key personnel with government emergency telecommunication service or GETS cards, which help prioritize phone calls for emergency responders when the lines are busy. We also have two-way radios, which can be used within the DWP's boundaries, and satellite phones, which can be used when all other forms of communications have failed. Lack of personnel may also be an issue. However, RIT personnel is comprised of 40 plus members who are dedicated solely for dam emergency response. And the large number of members makes it more likely that some will be available during an emergency. Additionally, we may have obstructions to the path. During the '94 earthquake, all services were impacted. Freeway bridges collapsed, gas lines and water mains ruptured, street lights and traffic signals were not working. Any of these could affect our impact or our response time. But to circumvent these issues, we may be able to make use of the following. DWP vehicles. These are official government vehicles which are allowed through traffic closures. The vehicles are equipped with beacons to alert drivers and authorities that we're responding to an emergency. We also have an aviation group. They have a bird's eye view of the situation. They can report hazards to the teams during the emergency and suggest detours. These redundancies are likely to help the teams get out in an emergency situation in a timely manner. And with all that said, I'd like to introduce Yidne, who will discuss the emergency action plan and the steps that EAP coordinator will take once notified of the emergency of the imminent failure.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Francisco. So going over Mulholland Dam EAP, it is basically a formal document prepared by LADWP in consultation with local public safety agencies that may be affected by the dam incident. For example, City of Los Angeles, City of Beverly Hills, City of West Hollywood, Culver City, Los Angeles County, and Incorporated County areas as CHP and Caltrans as indicated at the beginning of this presentation. And also we engaged some stakeholders, for example, California Office of Emergency Services, the Division of Safety of Dams, National Weather Services, and others. The EAP identifies potential emergency conditions at the dam. It specifies pre-planned actions to moderate or alleviate a problem at the dam and minimize property damage and loss of life. It contains an EAP response process for the dam owner to issue notifications to downstream emergency management authorities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think we went over this one. An EAP it includes inundation maps for emergency management authorities to develop evacuation plan. Please note that inundation maps are not evacuation plans. It identifies roles and responsibilities for the dam owner, emergency management authorities, and other stakeholders. It does not direct local emergency response. Only local emergency management agencies have the authority to plan and execute local emergency conditions operations. LADWP distributed Mulholland Dam EAP to all copy holders in impacted jurisdictions. Next, please. So LADWP, as a dam owner, is responsible for detecting, evaluating, and classifying emergency level as mentioned earlier by Francisco, activating the EAP after the emergency is classified, notifying appropriate agencies based on the flowcharts, which we'll see in a little bit, conducting emergency actions to save the dam if possible. Responsibility includes developing, maintaining, and distributing EAP copies to all copy holders, facilitating and after-action evaluation meetings, and conducting trainings, exercise, and annual notifications. Please note that conducting evacuation is a law enforcement responsibility. So next, please. This is more of a visual presentation of jurisdictional responsibilities of LADWP as a dam owner and emergency management authorities. It's depicted on the left side of the image, and as discussed earlier, detection of the emergency condition, classification of the emergency, notification and intervention as our LADWP responsibilities. Whereas as shown on the right side of the image, warning and evacuations are responsibility of emergency management authorities. LADWP as a dam owner is not directly responsible for emergency planning and operation outside of its properties. Next slide, please. So EAP response process consists of the following in general. For example, the first step in the EAP response process is detection of the emergency. Once the emergency is detected and reported to dam safety, it would be evaluated and classified to one of the 4 emergency levels. So which is either high flow operations, non-failure emergency, potential failure, or imminent failure. After the emergency is classified, the EAP would be basically activated and impacted jurisdiction would be notified based on the notification flow charts included in the Mulholland EAP. LADWP will continue to take emergency action plans to alleviate or save the dam if possible. Once the emergency is alleviated, for example, if it's not in an imminent failure, then AOP will be terminated. And lastly, follow-up activities such as post-incident activities, including after-action review meetings will be conducted. Next slide, please. So notification is one of the core parts of the EAP. And as mentioned earlier, after decision is made to activate the Mulholland Dam EAP, LADWP will notify impacted jurisdictions based on the notification flow chart included in the Mulholland EAP. A prescripted message will be used to notify public safety agencies for uniformity of information. And LADWP will provide periodic updates on the status of the emergency. Next slide, please. So this is the flow chart from Mulholland Dam. I'm not sure if it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but it's all included in the EAP that's distributed to all the emergency agencies. So as shown, LADWP personnel will notify pre-identified downstream emergency contacts, most of them provided with a 24-hour dispatch contact number. For example, LAPD, LAMD, LAFD, LA County Sheriff, and several other agencies. So it's really important that LADWP has the most current information in these flow charts. So LADWP conducts an all notification exercise to verify this contact information. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask, all involved to provide the current contact information when the LADWP EAP coordinator or representative reach out for verification. When notifying emergency contacts, LADWP staff member will use a prescripted message and will try to get a positive response at all time. Next slide, please. These are prescripted message LADWP may use to notify public safety agencies in the event there are incidents at the Mulholland Dam. In general, it has the name of the dam, the level of emergency, be it a potential failure or a minimum failure, where the dam is located. In this case, it's in the Hollywood neighborhood. A brief description of the emergency, if the dam is in danger of failing or not, what LADWP is doing to alleviate the emergency, except for imminent failure, of course, and any other pertinent information. And we also provide the contact information for further updates. Next slide, please. So the other aspect of the EAP is inundation maps. What inundation maps basically is, it is a map that delineates a dam breach flood inundation extents expected from a complete failure of the dam while the dam is operating in full capacity. It identifies impacted jurisdictions, critical infrastructures, and population at risk areas. It's used by emergency management personnel to develop evacuation plans. And as stated earlier, it's not supposed to be used as evacuation plan. And public safety agencies will prepare evacuation plans based on these inundation maps. As we all know, real-life dam incidents do not necessarily imitate, what is assumed in a hypothetical failure scenario. So the actual situation may be slightly different from what was depicted. When an incident occurs, emergency management agencies conduct local emergency operations based on the scenario at hand. Next slide, please. This is the inundation map that we have currently on hand, which was approved by DSOD. This map was developed back in 2013, and it's due for an update. Currently, LADWP is taking an effort to update this and get approved the new maps by end of this year. Next slide, please. As mentioned at the beginning of this seminar, in the event a Mulholland Dam breach, the inundation extent impacts the city of Los Angeles, city of Beverly Hills, city of West Hollywood, Culver City, and unincorporated areas in the Los Angeles County. Next slide, please. So where do we find these inundation maps? They are all included in the Mulholland Dam EAP. They're publicly available on the DSOD website, and it's available on file at LADWP as well. With that, I think we conclude the LADWP portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's outstanding. Okay, and so just as kind of a reminder, so we've had the earthquake, something bad has happened. It has now moved from the dam operator, LADWP, and they are making the notifications. And now this situation is moving to the City of Los Angeles EMD. So now we have this information, and now we're going to have the City of Los Angeles EMD department begin their presentation on what they do.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jillian Nivella. I am one of the emergency management coordinators here at the Planning and Resilience Division within the Emergency Management Department. So in this kind of scenario, I believe the plan that we have that will is most appropriate for this scenario is the dam and reservoir failure hazard specific annex, which was last updated on 2019. Next slide, please. All right. So before we go ahead, we start with the actual plan. I just want to provide an overall overview of the City of Los Angeles plan hierarchy. So with this one, you can see on this slide, you will see the emergency operations plan, and or also known as the EOP. Or there's a lot of acronyms here in emergency management. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I can check out the chat to answer that. So the EOP is the city's response framework for all hazards. It serves as a foundation for emergency response within the city of LA. And it delineates coordination before, during, and after an event occurs. As you can see, there are two different categories of annexes within the EOP. The first one is the hazard-specific annex, and the other one is the functional support annex. So with that, for this kind of scenario, the dam failure hazard-specific annex actually falls down to the hazard-specific annex. Next slide, please. So this is all our plans has to go through a review, approval, and adopted processes. So this is kind of like an overview on how a plan has been approved. So the first one is that, of course, once a plan is created, has to be updated, reviewed. It has to go through first by the Emergency Operations Board Working Group. Once they see it and review it, it will then goes to the Emergency Operations Board for approval and review and approval. And the next one, it will go to the mayor's office. And after the mayor's office look at the plan, review, and approved it, it will go to city council adoption. So basically all our plans here that we have in the city are all has to go through this vetting process and approval process and adaptation process. Next slide, please. So let's now go to the purpose of the dam and reservoir failure annex. So let's start with this. And on the first one is to provide a concept of operations and identify roles and responsibilities specific to the hazards for each appropriate department within the city of LA. It also defined the dam and reservoir failure response methodologies and procedures necessary for the rapid notification of city department and the public in the event of a dam and reservoir failure related to the emergency. In addition, which is a third box, it identifies actions that can be realistically be accomplished within a few hours to a few days to mitigate any adverse impact. And lastly, it is to ensure the consistency within the federal, state, Los Angeles County operational area, and other local governments' emergency response plan. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, this might be my longest presentation because I'm going to go to the concept of operations. So I want to put that out there. Next slide, please. Here, as you can see, you will see that this plan is developed in coordination with input from the city departments that have primary response or support responsibilities, as well as input from the appropriate non-city agencies with identified activities related to dam and failure events. As you can see here, we have the city departments. These are the departments that are in the city that have a primary response role. Also who are very active in putting this plan together. We also have the county as well as other agencies. Next slide, please. All right, so concept of operations, also known as ConOps. What is concept operations? Concept of operations presents a clear picture of the sequence and scope of the planned emergency response, what should happen, when, and whose direction. Here you will see the different life safety or mitigation actions and which city department is tasked or responsible for completing those once this plan is activated. So let's start with the initial safety assessment. Here in this plan, the initial assessment will be done by LAWP following a significant, unusual, or emergency event. Please note that for the dams or reservoir not within the city, safety assessment will be conducted by the owner of the dam or reservoir. The next one is a search and rescue. In this incident, search and rescue operations will be critical in the preservation of life. LAFD will be the leading agency in search and rescue operations, with numerous other departments and agencies having supporting roles. So public safety and utility control. Here in this, it is handled by LAWP, LADOT, and ITA. These incidents have the potential to damage utility infrastructure and can disrupt continuity of service. Damaged utilities will actually be reported by all departments and the public and private sector throughout the event. So I also mentioned LADOT here because here in this kind of scenario, according to the plan, LADOT, which is City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation, will be helping deploying traffic signal repair crews and construction crews to address down traffic signals. ITA stands for Information Technology Agency, and they will be helping in maintaining and repairing telecommunications, computer, radio, and databases. For the safety and security operations on this here, LAPD will be the leading agency in assuring the safety and security of the public. To accomplish this, LAPD will define and establish perimeters around the hazards, maintain law and order, and communicate other hazards to the appropriate department or agency. LADOT will assist LAPD with traffic management and identifying evacuation routes. The next one is a vital infrastructure assessment, repair, and continuity. Here in this type of actions, there are several city departments who are kind of like tasked to coordinate this. In this plan, it is stated that the Department of Public Works, Bureau of Engineering, and LADOT, which is the transportation, will assess all the vital transportation infrastructure for damage and operational capability. LADBS, or sorry, did I vital infrastructure? Oh yeah, so here LA Building and Safety, Department of Building and Safety will assess buildings predetermined to be crucial to city operations. ITA will assess critical public safety system, while LAPD will conduct windshield surveys of critical infrastructure and key resources that are proximity of the incident area. Of course, this will be done if the area is deemed safe. Next one, please. Next slide. So here, the building damage assessment, the Department of Building and Safety for the city will establish a procedure to expedite assessment and permit insurance for damaged building. Public Works will actually assist and provide additional inspectors to assist the building and safety with the Applied Technology Council, also known as ATC-20, which is a standardized set of procedures for evaluating buildings after an earthquake to determine if they're safe to occupy. For the vital traffic corridor management, here in this particular category, LADOT, Department of Public Works, Bureau of Street Services, and LAPD are the departments that are handling this kind of task. So LADOT will provide a specific routes for emergency response personnel and other routes for general public. The Department of Public Works Street Services will coordinate with the Emergency Operations Center to identify and respond to obstructions affecting any critical routes. And LAPD will assist with LADOT in directing traffic flow and maintaining high visibility of enforcement. And we also have the debris clearance. Here on this, the prioritization of debris clearance will be coordinated and prioritized from the EOC. The Department of Public Works will deploy damage assessment teams to field to the field to assess and map the types and locations of the debris. And lastly, documentation and typekeeping. This is very important for the city. All responding agencies will follow their own procedures with documentation and timekeeping. Next slide, please. In this type of scenario, the EOC, also known as the Emergency Operations Center, is going to be activated following when the EMD duty officer receive a call from LEWP that this event has occurred. So the EMD duty officer or the EOC director will determine the level of activation in which to address this type of scenario. So as you can see here, we have 3 different levels on how we activate our EOC. We have level 3, which is the lowest level, level 2, the mid-level, and level 1 is the highest level. Here in this scenario, it's going to be all hands in deck. It's going to be in level 1. Next slide, please. So in the EOC, one of the most important things that we do here is the information flow. This is what here on this slide, you will see that different kinds of how the information flow from the field to the Department Operations Center, which is the DOC, and to the Emergency Operations Center, which is the EOC. As you can see here, the arrows are double arrows because all this information are fluid. So it can go up and down or through horizontally. So all the information that we receive, it will go to the EOC. And with that being said, we want to make sure that everything that we receive or we will share from the EOC are all vetted information. So what is the purpose of information? Oh, next slide. Thank you. So what is the purpose of information sharing? This is actually the vital part here when we do the in the EOC. It is to like citywide prioritization. It is also to create of a common operating picture. If you have not heard about this, it's basically, it means we don't make sure that everyone is on the same page. All the information that we receive in the EOC will also help us with advanced planning, and it will also inform the policy level decision maker to create any policies that has to be done. And also it will provide informational tools, and that includes the situation reports that coming from the EOC as well the EOC action plans. Next slide, please. So with that said, that's the information flow, and now we're moving to the resource request process. This is kind of like how the resource request works when the EOC, is activated. So here, most likely when the EOC is activated, we try to work hard and see which city resources can be deployed in the area to help out with the incident. If the city of LA is not able to provide the resources needed, then we will go ahead to ask resource requests or to the operational area, which is the LA County, and then it will normally go to the region. If the operational area cannot handle it, then we'll go to the state and federal. So that's kind of just like a brief overview of how the resource request works in the city. Another example is, next slide, please. So we also have, this is just an example of mutual aid. This is something that some departments have mutual aid within their county counterparts or other city counterparts. Like as you can see here, LAFD have a mutual aid with the county, and with LAPD with the sheriffs, and EMD with OEM. Next slide, please. So this is here in this slide, as you can see, I talked about earlier about the dam and reservoir failure annex, and these are kind of like the cross-reference. These are like one of the annexes that we have that can be related on to the dam and failure annex. So one of them is a emergency public information annex, communication, early warning and notification, and you will see all the lists here. I would like to say that the city of LA has received a grant to overhaul all the annexes that we have. So most all the things that we have learned here in the seminar or in the functional exercise becoming, we will be applying those when when we will be updating this this specific annex. Next slide. And that's the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact me on this number. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So as you can see, we had an incident that occurred, the earthquake, which had a situation occur at the dam. The dam operator has now moved in and they are working and trying to mitigate that, and they have done their notification. It is now moved to the city of Los Angeles, where they're now responding as well as making their notifications. And as she said earlier, from this point, in order to coordinate this, because it's going across city borders and it's a much larger issue, we move this up to the next level, which will essentially go to the County of Los Angeles. So if there's somebody from the County of Los Angeles who will be able to respond to how this incident's occurring and how they'll respond with it.
Hey, Daryl, this is Jeremy. I'm covering for Bennett and Mariella. So in terms of, in this scenario, there's a couple things that would happen. One, despite what the plan says in terms of notification, which OEM would be kind of more of a secondary, we wouldn't necessarily get that first set of notifications. We would actually receive it through happenstance. So as the city or the dam owners make notification to OES through the warning center, and it's not necessarily through plan, it's just actually through practice that OES would immediately be reaching out to OEM to find out what's happening. So we would find out about that pretty quickly, and it would be circling through a number of different ways. Our role is really primarily to the unincorporated county and then secondary to the cities, as the cities have their own emergency management organization. But we're also available to support any of the cities in terms of their alert and warning, their mass notification, and also public information. So first and foremost, I think the things that we would be asking right off the bat would be cities, are you able to provide mass notification and alert and warning to your areas respectively and in a timely fashion? And if that's something that wouldn't be able to get out timely and provide residents that advance notice, we would be willing to step up and provide that level of support to cities and agencies. As far as activation, for a situation like this where we have a imminent dam failure, we would immediately be activating. We have a watch center that's currently 24/7 in operation. And with that, there's always somebody available to pick up the phone call that would happen. So our duty officer number has been provided all throughout the Mulholland Dam Annex. And so that information is well documented. We would take that information, we would then turn around and activate our duty support staff and then immediately go into an EOC activation. At the very lowest would probably be a level 2, followed by possibly a level 1, depending on the widespread nature of this. Most likely in this scenario, since it's a widespread earthquake, we'd probably already be in that level 1. But we would be activating our relevant ESFs, and that's a new function right now for us as we are transitioning our new EOP. The EOC is organizing around emergency support functions. So the ESFs that we'd currently probably be looking at immediately to help in terms of the dam response would most likely include the Sheriff's Department, Fire, Public Works, Social Services, and all of our partner agencies and cooperators to ensure that we're providing the evacuation, the rescue, the mass care and sheltering for that, and then as well as Public Works in terms of like the major response functions, getting appropriate material out to help kind of control that water flow and inundation, as well as looking at what modeling would be additionally available, and then any other type of cascading and downrange or downstream, in this case, impacts as it would relate to other water systems. Some of that would also include facilitating across jurisdictional emergency management coordination. So we'd be coordinating also with the state, probably most likely through the REOC, and then through the SOC. There would probably most likely be direct line of communication with the SOC in this case, just because this is a major, this would be a major incident for the state of California, especially following Orville. There would be a lot of discussion there. We'd also be wrangling a lot of the politicians. So the Board of Supervisors, obviously, everybody would be coming together on this, as well as a likelihood that we'd be seeing the governor making his way down to LA County. So a lot of that would be happening. Communications, for our communications, our first notification would hopefully be alert and warning through a WIA. That should be essentially, I'm hoping, would be functioning at that time. Maybe not. It might starting to see degradation due to saturation of the system, especially following an earthquake. But we'd also be putting out, mass information to public media, trying to get the word out, and then utilizing WIAs whenever possible. We have a number of other systems that we can send out messages through, such as NWIM, where those could reach, low band weather radio types. We'd be getting different information out through our ham radio operators, through Aries, and would be looking to try to reach out any way in every way that we can, just simply because we do realize that there would be a major saturation on telecommunications. Following that, our redundancy for operational communication would obviously be through our CWIRS and LA RICS radios, and providing that coordination with various groups. So the EOC would be very quick to try to get out a 205 to all of our county partners, and as well as our response agencies and cities, so that way they have the appropriate frequencies to operate on. For our coordination within our own agency, all of our county well, a good portion of our county departments, if not all, would actually be involved in some shape or form. Some have an immediate response roles, and others having support roles, including coming together as disaster service workers. And a lot of that would really be anything beyond our ESFs would most likely fit into disaster service workers. Messages. In this area, I think the message would most likely be in line with whatever your plan is stating. And then we'd also support sending additional messaging stating to avoid the area, avoid looky-loos, and avoid going to those different areas and trying to find out what's happening, and then avoid any flowing sources of water. So kind of like that turn around, don't drown campaign. And then in addition to that, would probably providing a lot of coordination with LA DOT, and also Caltrans in terms of other routing options that we can get people to avoid those areas. So evacuation will be a challenge, no doubt. Not only because of the fact that we've got water, but we've also have an earthquake that possibly will add challenges to that. So that will kind of be an issue. So there, would be gathering a lot of information, preliminary information in regards to roads, bridges, accessibility to public roadways, and any type of arterial roadways, and what damage may be sustained. So that way we can get that information out to the public. And I really think that kind of covers a lot of it. Some of the things in here is like I said, there will definitely be some redundancy in messaging, not necessarily in system, but just the fact that the same message will be coming back and forth. So I anticipate that there might be some challenges with how messages are being received and understood, or how it's coming in from and who's saying it, because just looking at the way folks communicate, I could see OEM being notified and providing information from various sources. And so that there would probably be an opportunity there to try to vet out some of the information and provide hopefully an official forum, official channel to try to get that information in, just to avoid some of that redundancy.
We all good, sir? Okay. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And messaging definitely is one of the key components here as we're trying to get to everyone to let them know what that same message is and there's no confusion. So we went from a situation where we had the earthquake. The dam operator is currently working on their notification and they're mitigating. The city of Los Angeles currently has the information and they have pushed up to our good friends at the County of Los Angeles for their assistance. From that point, a lot of times what happens is as we ask for resources or we're asking for assistance in certain areas with staffing, we would again, as our friends at the county said, ask for maybe their public works, perhaps sheriff department, as well as county fire and CHP. And one of the key components, I'm sure in this instance, is going to be the evacuation. The evacuation wouldn't just be one agency, it'd be multiple agencies. And so if we look at this now breaking down to a little bit further down to a single branch, perhaps, we would look at what would be the Caltrans would be somebody who would assist us in those evacuations. So do we have somebody from Caltrans who can assist us on their end? Oh, I apologize. From there, we would also go to, I apologize, to the Army Corps of Engineers who would also assist us as a partner agency. So we'll move to actually the Army Corps Engineers. Is Mr. Kingston on board?
Yes, this is Dave Kingston from the Army Corps of Engineers. Just doing an audio check. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I was moving a little bit too fast on that one, but we would definitely need your assistance in this. As you could tell us your capabilities and how you could assist the city of Los Angeles, we'd appreciate it. So we'll move to our partner agency from the Army Corps of Engineers. I should follow my agenda moving forward.
Hey, no problem at all. Hey, let's just go through briefly. I'm glad to be a part of this, and we're definitely here to support both the city and the county. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so really what I'm going to talk about is just what our AOR and some emergencies. This flooding is one of which would be in a dam and an earthquake and all that are part of it. And then a little bit of our authorities and programs and how they work in supporting our local partners. Next slide. All right, I guess, yeah, there we go. Just a reminder about what our area of our responsibility is. We cover all of Southern California. We're actually bound by watershed. So we have the southern part of Nevada, almost all of Arizona, a little bit of Utah's in our AOR. Of course, in this scenario, we're talking about the city and county of Los Angeles, which is obviously a dead center in our AOR. Next slide. You know, we talk about these are the things that we prepare for, and you've hit a number of them already with flooding and earthquakes. You've already talked about two of them that are on this thing. There are other things that we also plan for, just as I'm sure the other county and city emergency managers do as well. Next slide. Real quick, when we come to the authorities under which we operate at the federal level for the Army Corps of Engineers, there's really three of them. One of them is our normal civil works authorities. You know, we also operate dams here in Los Angeles County. And in fact, one of them, Sepulveda Dam, isn't really all that far away from the Mulholland Dam, of which is in this scenario, right? So one of the things that we do is we operate our dams. We have a reservoir operations center. And in fact, I'm convinced that under this scenario, our reservoir operations center is obviously in direct coordination and communication with both the county and the city, since that all these dams in Los Angeles County operate as a system. And so therefore, you know, we have this network during just normal operations of which we communicate back and forth, since there's a number of dams owned and operated by a number of entities right here in LA County. So just by operating our dams, we can regulate the amount of outflow. We can regulate how much we store in the reservoir itself. Those are just things that we normally do under our civil works authorities. We also have Public Law 8499. I'll talk more about that in some slides here, but that we can actually flood fight. For example, if we got a request, we could actually provide via normally contractors flood fighting assistance. We do have some emergency supplies like sandbags, HESCO barriers, things like that that are readily available. Then the other thing that we have is a rehabilitation program that can help restore any damaged flood control structures that are damaged through a storm or flooding event or event like this. The third authority that we operate under is really under the Department of Homeland Security. We're talking about FEMA, Stafford Act. So if this emergency becomes so big that FEMA's involved, they can actually give us a mission assignment to support, and we do quite a bit of work in support of FEMA under the Stafford Act. Next slide. For advanced flood, for Public Law 8499, if it's flood fighting, just a reminder, in this scenario, you would have to go up through Cal OES and request and DWR and request from the state governor or that it must exceed the local and state resources capabilities. So we could help respond that way, but again, you would have to go through the Department of Water Resources at the state level. They have the authority on behalf of the governor to request support under Public Law 8499. We would declare an emergency here. All work that we do under this one is temporary in nature. And then we have the ability, in addition to our local stockpiles of flood fighting material, we also have, we can call upon our National Flood Fighting Center in Rock Island, Illinois. Again, we have a couple of locations right here in California, but we also have Camp Navajo in Arizona that we can draw from. And then there's our engineer regulation 500-1-1 that talks about it. The key thing on this one is that it has to be at the state level that they request support, but we also help the local county, or the county is normally our partner. We assist them on helping craft the wording, and the same thing up at the state level for doing the request for support. Next slide. Under the Stafford Act, again, this is like the third one. So this is really where the governor needs to request assistance from FEMA. And if this got so bad down here on a 7.8 earthquake, as an example, I am confident that the governor of California would be reaching to FEMA in a hurry under the Stafford Act. So in this case here, again, there would be emergency declaration. Again, the governor could request a major disaster declaration from the president. And then once that's declared, then the FEMA would name a federal coordinating officer, and they would be the overall in charge of the federal response. We would be a portion of that, supporting FEMA under the federal response. Next slide. Real quick, under the Stafford Act, we are responsible for executing emergency support function number 3 at the federal level. That's Public Works and Engineering. These are some of the things that we do. And by the way, we've done these across the country in spades, whether it be temporary roofing, debris management. The debris management, by the way, we've done a lot of that in support of wildfire missions here in California. But we also do that for hurricanes. You can see we do urban search and rescue. A lot of the things like temporary power, like if there's power outages as a result of this earthquake or as a result of the Mulholland Dam flooding, and it falls under the Stafford Act, we can provide temporary emergency power. There are other things that we can do as well under ESF number 3. Next slide. We also have planning and response teams. Next slide. These are the way of which the Corps of Engineers responds to these missions under the Stafford Act. And again, one thing about us is we can draw from our entire network of capabilities across the United States, across the entire Corps of Engineers. We can call upon other districts and other divisions outside of our AOR to actually have people come here. And in a 7.8 earthquake in Los Angeles, I guarantee we would get all kinds of help from outside our district flowing this way under the Stafford Act. Next slide. We also have the emergency command and control capability. We have the deployable tactical operations system. You can see a picture of it here. This is currently in Los Alamitos, about 26 miles out of LA. And it's a great asset, and it has the ability to have satellite comms. It has all kinds of backup comms and generators and things like that. So in the event that local power and local comms is out, we can use our deployable tactical operations system to provide command and control. Next slide. So the bottom line is we know that there are going to be emergencies, and we have the systems and process and procedures to coordinate them. And just a reminder too, is that we're the backup to local and state capabilities. And if we're more than happy to help, but it does require a request from the governor or the governor's representative for us to actually provide that assistance. But we're very quick to do that when asked. I think that's our last slide, subject to any questions. Over. All right.
Outstanding. Thank you again to our good friends over there at the Army Corps of Engineers. So again, the incident is moving up even higher in level. And so we are getting all these resources, staffing and personnel to try to assist us. And now what we're going to do is now move to a smaller branch, a smaller piece that's still an important component. And we're talking evacuation. So when we talk about evacuations, again, talking with the county, we could talk about sheriffs having CHP involved, and also as well as our friends over at Caltrans. So if our friends at Caltrans, is there anybody on board?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Okay, sir. Now it is your time. So if you don't mind speaking to how you would assist us in your part for an evacuation. And again, this is a smaller component of what is a much larger incident, but how other agencies would be assisted.
Sure. And to let everyone know, I intentionally do not have slides on this one because I just want to brief this one a little bit quicker. Let me do a real fast sidebar for everyone, which is about, in case anyone from Cal OES is on the line, I'll let you jump in and expand on this. But 2 weeks ago at the All-State ESF Roundtable, they announced that the REOC or the REOC concept is now gone away. That is, the State Operations Center has a much larger permanent footprint than it ever has. So a lot of the duties that were traditionally performed by REOCs are now going to be done up in Sacramento at the State Operations Center. What OES intends to do is put more of their emergency service coordinators in with local EOCs, cities, counties, etc. So those Cal OES coordinators, emergency service coordinators, can then help you push stuff up to the SOC. So in some ways, it's increasing the footprint in cities and counties, and then they will help you be the coordinator up to straight to the SOC. So that in that respect, they're going to be minimizing that middleman part. So related to evacuations, I can make this fairly quick, and that is, I think most of you know, in California, evacuations fall under law enforcement. So ESF 13 is the state lead for evacuations. The Cal OES's law branch is in the process of just beginning to do a nice overhaul on the state level evacuation plan, and that's a good thing. So different state departments are going to be joining them. I don't know how many other programs will be joining them in that. It's just beginning to, get the team all together. But in the world of evacuations, since law enforcement takes the lead, Caltrans will be in a support role. So in that respect, some of the things we would do is we will help coordinate with county sheriff's office, highway patrol, fire services, law, etc., to help implement road closures and traffic controls. That's something we're always, want to be there to assist with that. Crowd control in some respect. I mean, we don't deal with people per se, but if we can help set up some of the control devices that can help move people around safely, we want to help out with some of that. We will be inspecting the state highway system to figure out which roads could be available. So then what we do is, after a catastrophic earthquake, we will do our normal road and bridge inspections on the state highway system. That's where we start. And then from that, we will bring that to the evacuation community, or actually the whole transportation community. So we know which routes can be used for what. Maybe it was intended for X, but because of certain damage, etc., we may only be able to do Y, but at least we'll bring that that level of awareness to the discussion. We'll work with Same thing, and not just roads and bridges, but when we think of ESF1 during a catastrophic earthquake and transportation, we're also looking at what might we need to push through the airports, through the seaports, through the rail ports, through the various transit hubs. So working with all those modes of transportation, we're going to help coordinate all that information as well. Debris removal, road clearance, all that. We have some capability for that. Corps of Engineers can help with some of that. Department of Defense might help with some. There's a theory that Caltrans, US DOT will start on the main line and push our way into, or the main line or the interstate system, push into the inner city. The inner city will push towards the main line or the interstates, and then we'll meet somewhere in the middle. That's kind of how we want to look at some of that stuff. In cases where during a catastrophic, there may be a real compromised internal transportation system, we'll push as much as we can from the outside in, and then maybe for a short duration of time, we'll need to air bridge things in. We can do that too. And then after action reviews, having a liaison in the ICPs or incident command posts, having liaisons in EOCs, we're going to do that as well. We want to make sure we can support that. I think the big takeaway here is we have a lot that we can provide awareness on, but we're really a stronger supporter, right? We're not the lead for evacuations, but we can provide a lot of good information to help evacuation planning. And that's what we want to be available for, is to do what we can in that area. And then if we need to evacuate through rail ports, seaports, airports, we will help coordinate that. The state of California does not own any public use airports. It doesn't own any transit district. It doesn't own any rail lines. It doesn't own the seaports. So we can't, take authority for that, which is not ours, but we can help coordinate with those modes of transportation and then figure out how might we put the best evacuation modal plan together, not just a road and bridge plan, but a true modal plan to move populations around during something catastrophic. That's one of the key goals that we're really leaning into now, is how can we take a true multimodal approach to evacuation planning and not just roads. And I will end on this and saying we're also looking at micromobility. How when you look at some second and third world countries who don't have the type of infrastructure we do, they move a lot of goods, a lot of personnel around with bicycles, with other forms of things. Well, if things are really bad, can micromobility be part of the solution to move things, people around, commodities, goods, etc. UC Davis up here in the north is doing a big research project right now on how might micromobility be used. So as we expand the road systems to be more bicycle friendly, does that have a role during evacuation planning? It might. So that's some of the research we're leaning into right now as well. So I will say we'll do everything we can to support the evacuation planners. We'll, from our engineers to our planners, we want to definitely bring a multimodal perspective to the whole situation, and then we'll do what we can to connect the dots at the local level. And that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That was very helpful, sir, and I greatly appreciate you joining us for that. So we've moved again from the incident all the way up to the highest levels, and then we've discussed a smaller branch of essentially a piece of the incident with the evacuations as well. I want to say thank you to all those folks who assisted with that, but there's nothing better than a real life incident that has occurred from the lessons learned from that incident. And so with us today, we're very fortunate to have the Department of Water Resources. Mark, are you on board by chance?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And so Mark will be giving us our case study into what happened up with Oroville. So thank you, sir, and I will turn over to you. Let me see if I can get the slide up.
Okay.
And we are good.
Okay, well, afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Hafner. I'm the Assistant Division Manager of the North Section for the State Water Project, which is part of the California Department of Water Resources. I was the planning and intel lead during the 17 incident, so I was knee deep in the entire incident from beginning to end. So we've compiled kind of a list of items that were lessons learned from what occurred and improvements that we made since then that hopefully will help you. Hopefully you don't have an incident of this nature or magnitude in the future, but being prepared is always the best thing. So I do appreciate that you are having these meetings and the insight and the coordination with the different groups, because that was one of the big challenges we ran into. So next slide, please. So just a quick overview. We'll talk about the State Water Project briefly, and then a project description of the Oroville facilities and how we're laid out in Oroville. Then I'll go through a background on the 17 spillway incident, review the lessons learned, and then if there's any questions remaining at the end. Next slide. And so this is a map of California. State Water Project is approximately 705 miles long, which is 2/3 of the length of California. We're responsible for pushing water from the north end of the state down to the drier south end of the state. And on the right of the schematic you're looking at there's field division labels, and the State Water Project is broken up into 5 field divisions geographically. And so we have Oroville in the farthest north. Going south, we have our Delta Field Division, our San Luis Field Division, our San Joaquin and Southern Field Divisions. My responsibility is I oversee the Oroville and Delta Field Divisions, as well as some groups that are headquartered in Sacramento. So we have a collection of canals, pipelines, reservoirs, hydroelectric power facilities. We deliver clean water to 27 million Californians, 750,000 acres of farmland and businesses throughout the state. Next slide, please. And so this kind of brief summary of the Oroville complex. We're located in Butte County, California. Oroville facilities make up a multi-purpose project, which includes water conservation and delivery, power generation, flood control, recreation, fish and wildlife enhancement. Oroville project is regulated by Division of Safety of Dams and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The flood control criteria for Lake Oroville are under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we, like I already talked about the 5 field divisions, we have 36 storage facilities. We're responsible for 26 dams, 21 pumping plants, 4 pump gen plants, and then 5 hydroelectric power plants. Next slide. And so for Oroville, we have 3 reservoirs in the Upper Feather. We have our Frenchman Lake, Antelope Lake, and Lake Davis. They're smaller reservoirs that supply some of the water that comes into the primary reservoir, which is Lake Oroville, which has a capacity of 3.5 million acre feet. It's also the largest earthen dam in the United States. We have 3 power plants in the Oroville complex, which is High Power Plant. It has 6 hydro units, which are directly below Lake Oroville Dam. We have our Ronald B. Roby, which is also known as Thermalito Power Plant. We have 4 hydroelectric units out there. And then we have a Thermalito Diversion Dam Power Plant, which has 1 small unit that powers the Feather River Fish Hatchery, which is a hatchery that we own and maintain, but Fish and Wildlife operates it for us. Next slide, please. And so this is just kind of a map showing the Thermalito complex from a high level. In the upper right hand, you see the 3 lakes circled. Those are the small lakes that feed the Upper Feather Basin. And then in the lower left, you can see Lake Oroville and the associated complex. And next slide will be a little bit closer on the Oroville schematic. And so if you're looking in the upper right-hand corner, we have Lake Oroville and the spillway, which that's where the incident occurred in 2017. We have the dam, and then at the base of the dam is the High Power Plant. Diversion pool, which goes further downstream as water is released from the dam to there's a split, and that's our diversion dam, where the water flows southward through what we call the low flow section by the city of Oroville, and then down through the Feather River, continuing down to the Sacramento River. Back at the diversion dam portion, it also splits off and heads westerly, and it feeds the Thermalito forebay, which is the supply for the Thermalito pumping generating plant. And that water is released into the Thermalito afterbay, which is a recreation boating area. There is some fishing there. And then we also have local water users. They have turnouts there that take water. Water is also released from this location back into the Feather River, where it continues south with the remaining water that's coming out of the lake. The system in Oroville is a pump gen facility. So Thermalito and Hyatt can also be reconfigured to actually pump water from the afterbay back into the forebay, back into the diversion pool, and back up into the lake. We haven't operated in that scenario for a number of years because we have some temperature requirements for the fisheries downstream that we're unable to meet if we operate as a pump right now. So that's something that the department is looking at for a fix in the future. But right now, we are a generation only facility. So that's just kind of a high level snapshot of the Oroville complex. Next slide, please. And so background on the 17 incident. The Oroville project experienced significant rainfall accompanied by snowmelt that created a situation which led to the Department of Water Resources, SWP, to activate the flood control spillway structure at Oroville Dam in accordance with the Flood Control Operations Manual. And on February 7th of 2017, a structure failure occurred along the concrete chute, warranting activation of the emergency action plan to manage the situation. Furthermore, additional rainfall resulted in the use of the emergency spillway structure for the first time since its construction. Next slide, please. And so this is an aerial photo that was taken maybe a week ago. It's a lot different than it's looked in the last 5 years plus. We're at full capacity on the reservoir with the significant rainfall we've had this winter. We've actually been operating the spillway this year from, it's been since December up until recently we turned it off. So it's been online for quite a while, making releases and operating functionally without issue. To the left of the photo, you can see the emergency spillway. That was the area that was damaged heavily when we used that in 17, and it's been since modernized and made usable. Next slide, please. And so now we'll go into some of the lessons learned. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities of supporting DWR divisions and external agencies. For example, law enforcement, emergency management agencies can increase efficiencies in decision-making, communication, and coordination during the response effort. So it's kind of what you're doing here is really clearly identifying what roles and responsibilities each group will be performing in the event that you have an emergency situation. And that's definitely having these partnering meetings and discussing who does what really makes it a lot easier when the emergency does occur. Next slide, please. Implementation of an incident command team was crucial to the organization of emergency response following the observation of the incident, i.e. partnering with CAL FIRE. DWR had staff that were trained in the SIMS-NIMS ICS structure, but we had never experienced emergency of this magnitude. And so we partnered with the sister agency, CAL FIRE. They have strike teams that are basically activated on an annual basis, given the number of forest fires we have in the state of California. And so they are basically the subject matter experts when it comes to the ICT. So we were able to partner with them during the incident, and they brought in one of their strike teams, and they partnered up with each individual group, with like the planning group, the incident commander, the logistics, et cetera. And so basically each person had basically a mentor to help them walk through the scenario as things were playing out. And it really, really was a good learning experience for us. And if it may be something that you might look at too, if you have any question of the ICS structure and how it operates, CAL FIRE is definitely a real-time proponent of it. But since then, we have created an internal group that is responsible to provide ICT training. They facilitate tabletop functional exercises, provide support during emergency situations. We had the floods earlier this year. We had to activate our Emergency Operations Center for the State Water Project, and that group came in and helped guide the group through it to maintain the ICS structure and do the proper reporting and monitoring of the situation as it went through. So definitely been something that we really have grown from, and it's really exposed us to a lot better scenarios going forward. Next slide, please. Activating an environmental officer is crucial to the incident command. The environmental response during an emergency is a critical factor for the determination of FEMA reimbursement. And external environmental agencies seek involvement early on during an incident. Environmental issues are a common subject for public and media criticism. During the incident, when something critical happens, environmental is kind of the last thing you really think about, but having someone identified as part of the IC initially can definitely make things a lot smoother, especially on the back end when you're cleaning up and justifying the decisions that were made and why you made them, at least from an environmental aspect. So having that person embedded in the IC was a huge benefit for us as well. Next slide. Depending on the scale and the length of the emergency, all personnel assigned to fill positions in the IT structure may not be, one, familiar with the facility, the dam, or its operation, knowledgeable of the ICS system, trained in SIMS NIMS. We recommend ensuring a robust comprehensive training program for the ICS structure. Need to have informational package pre-populated that highlights the facilities and their features, or at least set up a pre-briefing for new staff that are being rotated in. This went on for quite a while, this incident. So staff were brought in continually, and you can only train people for so much, and you only get to some level that they've had the training, but they've never really implemented it. So having that oversight helps people, but also getting them the information of the facilities that they're going to be assigned to for a while definitely helps considerably too. Next slide. Safety protocols and procedures implemented by the incident command help to minimize hazards created by simultaneous operations throughout the site during the emergency. We had safety officers and engineers engaged from the initial response. It was paramount for safe operations and response. I think during the initial incident, we had 0 injuries, 0 lost time incidents, all because we had safety officers there as repair and mitigation measures were being deployed and implemented. They were providing oversight to make sure that the personnel were doing things in a safe, efficient manner, and no one got injured, especially given the magnitude and the number of people involved. It's definitely something that we're pretty proud of that we had that. Next slide, please. Awareness and training on administrative and procurement related emergency policies and procedures are critical for supporting an ICT emergency. For example, food procurement. We didn't have, the state of California didn't really have or at least Department of Water Resources at the time did not have a good procurement policy for getting food for personnel that are working, supporting the IC. So we utilized CAL FIRE, who has contracts of this nature in place. So one of the recommendations, lessons learned, is need to have a plan for procurement and delivery for feeding staff during an emergency incident. Also, if the response is of long duration or at a distant geographic location, that finding lodging for the staff is key as well. The Oroville area is not as densely populated as the LA area, so the number of hotels and in local areas to be able to stay at quickly filled up, and so finding housing for personnel during longer duration incidents definitely was a challenge. So that's something to be cognizant of in the future. Next slide, please. Agencies such as CAL FIRE and Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the regulating agencies such as FERC and DSOD, can provide valuable input and support throughout the emergency. Coordination with and development of personal relationships with partnering agencies in advance of emergency will lead to greater trust and cooperation during the emergency. I mean, I see that the Corps was on here, and that's definitely big to have a lot of these groups together and having that engagement and putting a name to a face so that when the red flag does come up, you know who to call and how their response is going to be. So making sure that you have that good team building with all your partner agencies. Next slide. Existing consulting and service contracts can be used while contingent response contracts are being established. These contracts are critical in meeting monitoring, surveillance, and inspection needs throughout the agency. So one thing with the potential issue with the emergency spillway and the spillway, we had 24/7 monitoring and surveillance at various locations throughout the facility. And that can really burn through your resources very quickly. So we utilized some service contracts to bring in engineering firms that had the expertise and the background for dam safety to help us with the surveillance and monitoring inspection, so that we could rotate our staff in and out to get them refreshed and give us a bigger pool of resources so that we didn't burn personnel out. So that was a really big help that we had in place at the time. Next slide. Electronic repositories can be critical for documentation purposes as well as for making information accessible to the ICT and other DWR emergency responders. Having a server set up for document storage prior to emergency was a huge thing, because the sheer amount of paperwork with the SITSTAT reports, the mapping, the inundation mapping, all the other things that go along with a major incident. There's a lot of information coming in, and having somewhere to be able to put it and have a file structure kind of pre-populated was really a big key thing for making sure that the data was there, it was going in the right boxes, and that when you needed to look it up at a later date, you knew where to go and where it was. So next slide. On fast-paced incidents, the services of a scribe to record and track decisions and actions of the incident commander on a continuous basis is essential to information sharing among the IC. During the initial response, things are so chaotic and they're happening so fast, and there's so many decisions and so many discussions going on that the incident commander really doesn't have time to document what was done, what was said. And so having someone that can shadow that individual to act as kind of a note taker was something that we definitely found out after the fact that was really beneficial. So as things calm down, you don't necessarily need to scribe as much, but when the heat of the moment, it's definitely nice to have someone there that can act as that note taker while the incident's occurring, so that later you can actually regroup your thoughts and understand what was discussed and what was said. Next slide. The development of task force to execute specific issues, such as we had issues with when the emergency spillway is operated, a lot of debris came down into the pool, causing the reservoir, the tailwater elevation to go exceedingly high, and we risked the potential for flooding our power plant there. And so we had to have some task force set up that were key in focusing on critical things to get repaired. One of the other components was the transmission lines that come out of the power plant went directly over the spillway, and they were also in danger of being damaged or removed with the erosion. So we had to do some emergency work to get those lines rerouted. And so key task force being set up to focus on those were really key to keeping the system functional as best we could. Next slide. A properly staffed SIMS and ICS trained public affairs office can be crucial when responding to a multi-jurisdictional or large-scale emergency. The incident expanded rapidly with social media quickly dispersing misinformation. Having a properly staffed public affairs office is crucial to staying ahead of the misinformation. And the PIO needs to be embedded in the incident command and the JIC to understand the current situation and be responding accordingly to those media blasts. So next slide. Public social media outlets can put out information, typically inaccurate, faster than a PIO can post official messages. If management of public information and the use of social media accounts such as Twitter, Facebook, etc., is centrally administered, it may not be flexible enough to address urgent emergency issues. Procedures and policies for public information sharing can delay the approval of notifications to external agencies. So one of the lessons was ensuring the PIO is staffed properly, has a communication plan to gather quickly approve and distribute the information in a timely manner. And the Public Affairs Office should be embedded in the Incident Command Team and the Joint Information Center. Next slide. Formalized handoffs between the Incident Command Team shifts will assist with the transfer of information regarding incident emergency response status and help avoid misunderstandings and confusions about objectives. So making sure that if you're running a 24/7 operation and we were on a 12-hour shift, that you have that overlap between the oncoming crew and the leaving crew, so that they can sit down and properly discuss what was done during their shift, any issues that were encountered, and then what's potentially left to get done for the next shift going forward. Next slide. Shift and position changes, amendments, and modifications to the structure within the ICT and Physical Emergency Operations Center location should be effectively communicated or distributed, so all personnel will know who and how to contact in a variety of situations. So having a clearly identified communication plan, so when any changes are made, that all the appropriate parties are notified accordingly. That's definitely one of the lessons learned. So as anytime you make a change with the IC, that you let all parties know, so that they're not reaching out to someone that may not be available now going forward, or they might even know where that person's at. Next slide. Depending on the pace and magnitude of an event, there may be changes to the organizational structure. When a unified command system is established, it should be effectively communicated to the entire IC team sections and partnering agencies. This helps ensure that all appropriate personnel and emergency response agencies are involved in the decision-making process and are aware of their duties and responsibilities resulting from the decision. The ICT structure has a predetermined organizational structure. For consistency, this should be adhered to as much as possible. Again, all changes should be communicated out both internally and to the unified command. It's sort of a carryover from the previous slide, just really reemphasizing that if any changes are made, that you share that with all your partner agencies as well. Next slide. Mass notification system messages to emergency responders during an incident may not be delivered timely, conform to the AAP template messages, or may lack enough detail to be properly understood by the recipients. Ergo, information regarding an emergency and response effort can be shared on social media prior to being distributed through the managed mass notification system. So making sure that your staff are trained properly and that the AAP pre-populated messaging is adhered to for dissemination during an event. And staff should understand and follow the proper communication paths. And then communication should be clear and very consistent. Next slide. Consistent messages can help avoid confusion regarding the incident, the likelihood of consequences at the time period before consequences might occur within each emergency level. For example, non-failure emergency versus potential failure versus imminent failure. Again, the need for consistent messaging following the EPA guidelines, and then also working with your EMAs and your partner agencies so that when you make a declaration of a potential versus an imminent failure, that they understand what that means. That there's no second guessing that. I mean, it's pretty clear when you say potential to imminent, but it's still putting that in a layman's terms can really go a long way to really making sure that they clearly understand the urgency going from one level to the next. Next slide. Emergency contracting mechanisms led to a robust and very rapid response to address critical issues during recovery operations. Example, the debris removal in the diversion pole and the power line relocation. We had emergency contracts in place, specialized contracts that really allowed us to be able to focus on some of these key tasks that were done. And so making sure that you have a contracting method in place when it comes to specialized tasks, that was really crucial to at least keeping the power plant online for us as well. Next slide. Coordinating planning between the recovery and the recovery operations and emergency response measures helps avoid operational confusion and unnecessary challenges for the IC. So basically, if you're starting to work on your recovery while sort of the emergency is still ongoing, make sure that the groups are discussing what they're doing so that there's no overlap, there's no double dipping or no confusion as to what needs to be done going forward as well. Next slide. And that's it for me. So are there any questions from anybody?
If anybody has some questions for Mark, if you just raise your hand and I'll see if I can click on it. Sir, if you don't mind, I'd like to take the first question. Actually, it's maybe two.
Sure.
If you can, if we could go back in time, and I wish we could do that, we had the end game time stones and all those things from Marvel. What is one thing you wish that you could have maybe had planned ahead of time or worked on ahead before the incident that may have helped you? And what would you say during the incident do you wish you might have done that could have been a little bit more helpful?
I think probably having, I mean, we had the training, but you could only kind of do the training in like a classroom setting. And when it comes to real life exposure, it's night and day. So I think going back and having some exposure with agencies that kind of do the incident command or emergency response consistently and maybe talking to them. And I know CAL FIRE's even mentioned to us even that they would be willing to let agencies come on site when they were in an incident command, and so that you could actually see what they're doing and how they're set up. And I think having some of that exposure prior to the incident would probably have helped us at least respond initially a lot quicker and a lot more effectively, because we were a little chaotic there because we just really knew kind of what to do, but not totally what to do. And what was the second one? I'm sorry.
No, that was outstanding. I appreciate that. The second one is during the actual incident itself, what do you think would have been helpful to you to either save time or personnel or to move in a faster direction? So that you think that would have helped you to do a little bit better?
I think getting the communication lines open between us and our partner agencies a lot quicker, and making sure that we knew that everybody was basically meeting on a routine basis, which is technically what the IC is supposed to do. But just making sure that as we were making decisions regarding the spillway, that like CAL FIRE or the Butte County Sheriff understood why we were making the decisions we were making, why we were making some releases from the spillway that they were like, why don't you just shut it down? Well, there's reasons why, because there's more water coming into the reservoir, and it's going to be worse if we don't evacuate some water now. So I think just making sure that the decision-making process is clearly understood by not only the group responsible for the incident, but also the partner agencies understand what you're doing, because a lot of the dam related stuff is very unique, and not everybody outside of the dam world really understands what you do and how you do it. And so making sure that the EMAs understand why you might be making releases, because you've got more releases or more inflow coming in that you've got to get out, and you've got to do it in a slow manner. You can't just add a ton of water to the system. So just making sure that they're understanding the system and how you make the decisions you're making and why.
Okay, outstanding. Well, that was an outstanding presentation. I greatly appreciate it. And it was great to learn those lessons. I think for us as well as for every other agency out here to try to use that to help us in the future. Does anyone have any questions for Mark from Department of Water Resources in regards to this incident? Hands up from anybody? I'm looking. Anybody in the chat? I'll give it a few moments here. We have somebody maybe in the chat here. We have a hand. Gary Singer, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about public alert and warning. Were there any key lessons learned from the messages that went out to the public? What kind of response and feedback did you get about the messaging?
Well, I think some of it was just making sure that we're clear and consistent with our messaging, and that especially with, like I said, with the local sheriff, that they understood when we sent out like our typical EAP responses, that because they're getting that message and then they're going to disperse it out to the public as well. And just making sure that the messaging goes out, that it's in I guess a user-friendly format. My background's in engineering, and so when I talk to people, I tend to confuse them if they're not necessarily understanding my engineerese. So just making sure that the messaging goes out, that it's simple, it's to the point, and it's very clear.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I do have a typed in question. Are you folks tracking the pending El Nino event forecasted to be significant this winter? If so, what are the plans for any potentially big black swan events?
I know our headquarters in Sacramento, they are monitoring that real time. I know our flood management group is. We actually have a weatherologist on retainer right now that helps monitor that. One of the things, at least for our reservoir up in Oroville and some of the other ones, is they're looking at a new technology called FIRO, which is Forecast Informed Reservoir Operation. It's supposed to be able to help you to do better long-term management of the reservoir, especially with these ups and downs with the weather patterns we've been having. So I haven't been totally involved with that, but I know it's a very hot topic, especially with the going from almost no water in our system to where we can't give water away right now because there's so much of it. So having that oversight and the management for long term is key. But I decided that we are monitoring it. I don't know the overall status of it, but I know the department is very, very privy to it right now.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question at all, by chance?
I see it in Brian
think-
Franco. What agencies were in the unified command on initial response? I don't think we entered into unified command until a little bit later, once the situation progressed further. But we partnered with it was CAL FIRE, I believe, Army Corps of Engineers, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, CHP, CAL FIRE, Butte County Sheriff, I think the local area PD. I'm sure I can envision the board on the banner. I'm sure there's a few other agencies that I missed. Caltrans would have been another one. But pretty much all the major state agencies in the local area. I know even Fish and Wildlife and Department of Parks and Recreation were part of it as well.
Okay. Anyone else with any other questions? Going once, going twice. We're good. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you doing this and taking the time out of your day, as well as for the Department of Water Resources to allow you to do this. So we know it's a lot on your plate, and thank you so much for what you're doing. And we have great appreciation for you. And thank you for the lessons learned.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do is, if no one else has any other questions, I will give a couple moments here in case somebody has another question before we say our thank yous. Okay, so what I would like to do is just say thank you to all those agencies who participated in this. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to assist us in these lessons learned and how you play through your policies and procedures well as we review our plans. This is again something that the City of Los Angeles and our partner agencies do often. This is what we do when we make sure we coordinate with each other and work as a team. We are all on the same page trying to do the greater good for all. So I thank you for doing that. I do want to see if Miss Carol Parks is on board by chance. I don't know if she's here. She's my general manager. Okay. With that, I want to say thank you to Ms. Carol Parks and to all the team at the Emergency Management Department as well for your assistance in putting this together. If you folks have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and do remember that we have a full functional exercise that will be occurring in winter 23-24. So that's something to look for. And I think I may have one more question. We're going to be looking to see whether or not we share the slides later. So that's something we'll be looking at, but we will be putting up the video hopefully within a few weeks. So we have recorded this. And is there any more questions? I think that's it. So with that, folks, I thank you very much. That concludes the seminar, and I hope you all go and be well. And thank you again. Take care.
All right, outstanding job. Very, very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and a special thanks to Cliff Plum, who was not able to make it. He was a great assistance. Thank you, everybody who participated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye now.